Alrighty guys, welcome back to another episode of Airtime with Jordan. I'm your host Jordan Fasso, and today we're going to do the Swans. So they've got one of the first matches of the weekend, one of only two matches against the Hawks. So let's get stuck in, and by now if you've been listening to the previews, you probably know the drill. I'm going to go through a review from last year, ins and outs for this in the offseason, give some expectations going into the year, where I think they'll end up, some players to watch, and then give my projection on where they're going to end up on the ladder. So without further ado, let's get stuck into the Swans. And unfortunately it wasn't the fairy tale ending for them last year. They went 17-6 in the regular season and home and away season, and finished first on the ladder. Looked very I don't know, unbeatable early on in the year, I guess, is how people sort of had them. And then they definitely faltered as the year sort of went on in the back half and then even into the finals. They still look good in the finals, but it wasn't great in the end. But I won't harp on about the grand final too much, but I've got to review it to some degree. So just on their season, they jumped out of the blocks with one loss out of their first 14 games, and then definitely came back to earth, ending the season 5-5 in their last 10 home and away games, which sort of equalised the amazing start that they did have. And I sort of flagged it at the time, but you could sort of see the warning signs coming. Obviously, the 5-5 to end the season wasn't amazing, but you could sort of put that down, or maybe they just upped their training load or something and getting ready for the finals. But that also included a 100-point loss to Port Adelaide at Adelaide Oval, and I also pulled this stat at the time, but it was the last time a team lost by 100 points and won the flag was in 1945. So, as I said, it's never a good stat when you're on the bad end of that, and the last time something like that occurred was a world war. And I said even back then when I brought that stat up that, let's see what happens between now and September. Maybe World War III is on the way, and, Sydney will win the premiership. And unfortunately for anyone who's watching the political climate of the world, World War III may very well be on the way, but no premiership to show for the Swannies, unfortunately, out of last year. But I think what happened was that people were sort of enamoured with the high-end talent they had and how good the big three in the middle were all season. Specifically, Gordon, Warner, and Heaney. They're all amazing. Don't get me wrong. But they weren't really in ripping form coming into the game either. The Swans, it's not like that high-end talent was just going to carry them over the line. And I think at the time I sort of felt that the Lions' best was better than the Swans, and that the Lions had the momentum of playing at a higher level over the previous 2 weeks of the finals. I might have been shortchanging the Swans' performance against Port a little bit, but having that extra week off, and then combining that with an easy prelim, just sort of didn't give them that edge that you probably want a team to have coming into the grand final. Whereas Brisbane had, some really exciting matches that they played, and had to show up in big moments, and they did. And I think that was really the crux of it. They were just better prepared for the intensity of the final, and I just don't think that Sydney were ready for the heat, and whether that was the demons from 2022 or that poor run of form into the finals, combined with a bit of an easy draw, I guess, into the grand final with Port Adelaide in the prelim. But regardless, I guess we won't necessarily know what the absolute reason was, but regardless, it was a disappointing end to the year for one of the most talented teams in the league. And with that being said, I think it's probably time we get into the ins and outs and start previewing their season. Swans fans probably don't want me going on too long about it all, so hopefully they can bounce back this year and see where they go. So coming into the team this year, we have Riak Andrew, who's Mac Andrews' brother, of course. He played in the practice match against Gold Coast the other day, so I'm not sure. I don't know if he's necessarily going to get a game week to week, but the other ins they had were Riley Bice, Ned Bowman, Jesse Detoli, Blake Leadler, and Ben Patton, ex-Saint there. So, not a whole lot of ins here for the Swans that I expect to contribute as first-year players, but the one guy that I would keep an eye on for sure is Ben Patton from the Saints. I think that the Sydney, have quite a knack for finding delisted or, distressed assets and just forming a role for them that suits them quite well, and they generally sort of perform above expectations in that regard. So he's a solid small defender, Ben Patton, with pretty good skills and could be an under the radar get for them. And I'll talk about how his addition might be able to give them a bit of flexibility down back, especially this year. And going out, you have Harry Arnold, Jacob Costanti, Jaden Margor, Lachlan McAndrew, Luke Parker, Sam Reid is retired, and Cooper Vickery. So, out of the outs, obviously Sam Reid, great career. It feels like he's been around forever, so for him to finally retire is, probably well overdue for him, I think. And the only other notable out that I'll probably touch on is Luke Parker, of course, and he's one guy you never had to question his intent on the ball and the effort. I think that he may be finished in terms of contributing to a finals team though. Another year on, he obviously struggled to get a game, had the long suspension last year as well, but I do think that he's probably not in Sydney's best 22 again this year. He might be on the fringe again, so that fair enough that he wanted to leave and get some consistent games down at North Melbourne, and that being said, he's probably better suited to a rebuilding North team at the moment and can sort of show them the ropes a bit more, but it would have been nice to keep him if the option was there for depth purposes, but I completely understand the reality of Luke Parker wanting to move on. So with that being said, let's get into some of the expectations I have for them, and obviously the burning question is, what the hell do the Swans do without Errol Goulden? So unfortunately, fractured ankle, not really sure on the timeline for him, but it seems like he's going to come back this year regardless though, so that's some good news that he will be back. And luckily for them, they have a lot of midfield depth, and they have a lot of guys that they can shift from there, that shift into the midfield from other positions. And I'm thinking of the Cal Millses of the world and Ollie Florent, especially. Those two guys you can add to the mix pretty quickly. They've played through the middle in their career. I don't necessarily think that you're going to be able to replace Errol Goulden. That's pretty black and white how amazing he is. But a team with Chad Warner, Isaac Heaney, Taylor Adams, James Rowbottom as the core group of mids, and maybe Taylor Adams might not play as consistently through the midfield this year, but they have the flexibility to add those guys that I spoke about, like Mills and Florent, who could be permanent midfielders, but also they have a lot of guys who can run through the midfield, like Papley, James Jordan, and Braden Campbell, Justin McInerney, etc. So, I think they should be fine to cover him for the home and away season, and as he gets up to speed, in that regard, whether they take a bit of extra time depending on how they are going in wins and losses. But I'm just hoping that he's back and firing for finals, because you want to see the best players playing at that time of year. So hopefully he takes his time, and I think Sydney will be able to weather the storm a little bit, given the depth of quality they have in that position. And of course we will need to see a little bit more responsibility from Heaney and Warner if that's possible. Especially in terms of when the match is there to win, you're down a fiddle. So, if they weren't already tasked with winning matches, those two, but overall I think they'll cover him pretty well. And I think the one thing to note is that if Errol isn't back for finals footy, or not he's playing at his best, and I think there's definitely a ceiling on what they can accomplish. Errol Goulden is that important to them in terms of his foot skills around the stoppages and stuff to get the ball. I've never seen someone dart balls as low and hard as he does into the forward line. So that'll be sorely missed if he's not able to be at his best. So let's not worry about that right now, and I'll make the assumption that he will come back near his best at some point this year. And that's the sort of the mindset that I'm going to go through with this preview. So enough about Errol for now, and as I said, they should be right for the minute anyway. But more in general, I think that they have the talent to bounce back this year, the Swans, and the appointment of Dean Cox is going to be crucial for them mentally, at least. I think that a fresh start is definitely needed. So, especially after so long under one coach, it just sort of gets stale after a point in time, right? And when you have the demons they clearly had when it came to the grand finals the last few times they've played in them, maybe a new coach helps exercise those demons a little bit. And there undoubtedly will be some growing pains for the Swans early on with a new coach, and but a team this established will be able to figure out on the fly a bit too, and they have sort of that baseline of what's made them successful over the last few years anyway. So I think despite, Goulden going down, they still have so many stars that make them so dangerous across all their lines, even with like a new coach and implementing a new game plan. Because, like a team that boasts these guys like Heaney, Papley, Warner, Blakey, Grundy, Mills, Rampy, the list goes on. They're still stacked. Well, definitely, regardless, they're going to be a tough beat each week, even after that sort of demoralising grand final loss. And it's going to be pretty interesting to see what Cox does differently, though. Like the midfield, as star-studded as it was, just wasn't able to compete with Brisbane in the contest at the end of the day. Like Lachie Neale and Will Ashcroft just had their way with them. So obviously you're comparing them to the team that they got beaten to on grand final day, which ultimately is what the Swans are trying to do, right? They're trying to win a grand final. So I'm not necessarily talking about were they good enough against Gold Coast in round whatever, where they've set the bar high, and that's sort of the point of comparison that you've got to make with them. And I just don't think that they were competitive and that won the contested ball enough, and I think that's sort of where they came down. And whether Callum Mills is the guy who goes back in there, and that's the magnet that Dean Cox shifts around, is to provide some more size and grunt inside. That could be interesting, and I think that's the initial move that I'd probably make if Callum Mills has been training in the midfield at all this year. And I think that I spoke about Ben Patton. I think the addition of him really makes it a possibility for either Callum Mills or Ollie Florent to move inside. I think Ben Patton is a capable defender, like gives them a bit of that flexibility, and I think they'd probably prefer Florent to stay across half back, as he wouldn't necessarily provide that grunt that I'm sort of speaking of inside that Callum Mills might provide. But by the same token, he is also more of a like for like in terms of Errol Goulden replacement too. So I can see the path of that happening as well, but I'd probably lean more to getting that size in there as well, just to complement Heaney and Warner, which would be just a huge midfield, and like you would not want to be going up against them. But regardless, I think Ben Patton definitely, if he's going to be in the best 22, gives them a bit of that flexibility and something to keep an eye on with regards to the midfield rotations and who he frees up specifically in there. But then, up forward, I'm definitely a little bit more worried than the rest of the ground for the Swans. It seems that they may have some impact, like that area may have some impact on their defense too, after seeing some of the moves that Cox made in the first practice match, because both Logan McDonald and Hayden McLean have had interrupted pre-seasons, and then maybe this was the plan anyway. Tom McCartan started up forward, kicked 4 goals against the Suns the other day, so he played as their key forward with Joel Amartey, and I'm sort of unsure if that's going to be a permanent position for McCartan. It sounds like they are going to at least experiment with it early on. So if that is the case, then are either the 2 key forwards that didn't play in Logan McDonald and Hayden McLean actually going to, get a game if Tom McCartan's playing up forward? So it's a puzzling one for me, though, because although the returns on McCartan were pretty great with him kicking 4 goals, he's just so good down back for them. And I feel like if he's playing up forward, then someone's going to be the odd man out for Sydney down forward. And given Amartey was probably their best key forward last year, it's looking like it's McLean or McDonald, and McLean was their second ruck off in most instances, so maybe that second ruck role goes to Amartey instead, and McLean's the odd man out. But I think I'll probably get into the weeds a little bit too much, but regardless of who ends up playing in that second ruck role, their key forward positions was honestly probably one of the worst in the league last year. I think they did their job and allowed some of the Sydney small forwards to come into the game, but I think the fact that their midfielders have such a high ability and to hit the scoreboard really hid the fact for Sydney that their key forward stocks sort of are pretty lacking, and maybe this move was to bridge the gap. In the move of putting McCartan forward, sorry, to clarify, was to bridge the gap in terms of their key forward quality and like the contributions that they sort of get from that position. But because I guess that's the idea, because I wouldn't really want to rely on your midfielders to kick a winning margin every week
and without Gordon, your Warner and Heaney's of the world may not have the luxury of spending as much time forward of the ball this year. So that means that you need a more reliable key forward option to, bridge that gap. And I think I'm not really sold on McCartan being the full-time answer up forward. I've been a long time Logan McDonald fan. I think his size and kicking ability, maybe not kicking ability, he's missed some important goals last year, but I think that his just the general size and presence that Logan McDonald provides up forward is why I'd probably favour him. But maybe his injury over the offseason means that he didn't get a great run at it in terms of developing his forward craft a little bit, and whether he's going to develop into that role as a dominant key forward as quickly as the Swans sort of need him to is another question. Therefore, I guess that's why they've decided to put Tom McCartan in that role. And for me, if they don't find a key forward this year, I don't think that all hope is lost necessarily. Definitely not for the home and away season anyway. They still have the formula that I spoke of, that fallback formula of just get some tools up there that compete, and hopefully Papley and Will Hayward, and then the midfielders can supplement some goals for the Swannies. But I think it does limit what they can accomplish in the finals at least. And then if McCartan is going to be a forward, could it be they're just not going to play many key defenders this year? It'll be interesting to see how that part of the ground takes shape, especially if he's up forward, because I think Rampy sort of fell off a little bit last year. He's still a very good player, but I don't know if he's capable of playing on the quicker small forwards as often anymore, as definitely not as often as he previously would. So he potentially is a key defender full time now for me, and maybe he's just taking McCartan's role full time. And then Blakey as well. You definitely don't want him being a pure key back. It really takes away from what he's good at in terms of his running power off if he's running off his forward opponent, or his ability to intercept against other contests down back, or just launch the Swans attack from the back half. I think that you don't want him stuck on the key forward that he has to mind all day. You definitely want him being that free defender if you can, or putting him on the least damaging small forward for the opposition team. And that's when you're looking at the rest of their key stocks. Is Joel Hamling going to get a go this year? Is Aaron Francis the best 22 player? I don't know. I don't know if what the deal is with Melican either. He's obviously played a fair bit of footy last year, so I think that they've definitely got some questions with their key backs. And my real worry is just that if Tom McCartan's playing off forward, I really hope that doesn't mean that Nick Blakey is going to be a key defender. That would really detract from his value, I think. And they do have a lot of guys who can be interchangeable at times, down forward or back, and having that many key position players on your list means that I think Cox might spend a bit of time in the start of the year tinkering with who he wants in which role. But the one thing I do know is that McCartan, Blakey, Rampy are a formidable defence when they're all back there. So, if it all does go to shit a little bit with the McCartan up forward situation, and whoever they end up playing down back, then that's the thing. You just put them all back there, and you shouldn't leak any goals, I don't think. So, obviously a lot of this talk is centered around McCartan here, but that's sort of the data point that we have to go off in the practice match, and it's more about sort of what he represents in terms of the roles of which players are going to play where. And I think it's, a worthwhile exercise from Cox to tinker with that at the start of the season, because you can figure out if it's going to work or not. And as I said, if it doesn't, you just revert to whatever lineup you had last year, and it got you to a grand final, so it's not the end of the world, I don't think. But I think overall this team is just very, very talented. There's no way they're missing the finals for me. They have a proven formula in the home and away season that I've talked about, and although Cox has some things to work out, I think the fallback option's going to be there, which provides a very high floor for Sydney based on their season expectations. And as I discussed, their forward line may yet again hold them back from winning a premiership at the absolute pointy end. But if they're and especially if they're unable to discover a true focal point, as I don't think they necessarily can have the same reliance as their mids on their mid, as they did last year. At least not in the finals anyway, as I said. Now, for some players to watch for me, Nick Blakey. I know that, all Australian, everyone knows about him, not necessarily a breakout player, but I do think that he's only scratching the surface. He's only 25 years old and was one of the few guys that I thought had a pretty decent day in the grand final. His run and carry will always be there, but I think his intercept game can continue to get better with experience and just his general decision making, where he can become more damaging from that back half. He's like a supercharged sort of Brendan Goddard, if you will. I think his foot skills and aerial ability can be really, really good and similar to Goddard in that way. But then you have the absolute top end speed as well that you can tack onto that. So I would expect another year and another All Australian one at that from Nick Blakey, and potentially a larger role to play in the Sydney defence depending on who lines up where. Another one for me is Justin McInerney, and I probably should have spoken about him a little bit more in that conversation about Errol Goulden's replacement inside, but I think this guy definitely can be a barometer at times for the Swans. When he's up and running down the wings, it can be pretty contagious, and I feel like the Swans, that when they're playing well when Justin McInerney, is a part of what's going on, and I'm excited to see if he can play a role in the centre this year, and if so, what does that look like? So, I'm a sucker for those tall sort of mids, and he stands at 189 centimetres, so he's not massive, but definitely on the larger side, and I'm keen to see if they experiment with him inside at all, and I don't know necessarily if he has the quickness or strength to be an inside mid, but, his outside run will always be an asset, and I think there's just potentially some untapped potential there with him and the Swans inside this year. Tom McCarthy. No, I'm just joking. I've discussed how pivotal he's going to be already, so I'll leave him for now. But I'll finish up with another guy that had a pretty solid year last year, I thought. Braden Campbell. He had a I wouldn't say it was a breakout year because it was a bit choppy for him in terms of performances, but he was a high pick. He was 5th overall, and I guess I'm just sort of hedging bets on who's going to take advantage of Errol Goulden's injury. And, as that former 5th overall pick, there's still something more there for me. I think, that he's just sort of scratching the surface a little bit, like I said. Well, definitely not similar to Blakey. Blakey's already there. But, I feel like there's something here with Campbell. There's sort of two ways, I think, that he breaks out. Directly if he takes any of Errol Goulden's time in the middle, or by that same sort of token, if McInerney moves in, I think that we see more of Braden Campbell on the wing this year. He's been the perennial sub option for the Swans, unfortunately, and some guys just sort of get resigned to that role. But he had a great performance in the first final against GWS when he came on and really helped the Swans when they needed it, and in that game, and really shifted momentum. And that's something that I know that's just one sort of moment or whatever, but that's a moment in a final where he showed he wasn't afraid, of the moment, I guess, for lack of a better word. But it's something that I look for in players and their development, and if I'm deciding to buy stocks in a certain player, I'm like, do they show up when they need to, and if they've shown to be a big game player, or had some big moments in games, then that's sort of one data point that I think that people should look at. Broadly speaking, obviously, anyone can have good moments, but the way he shifted the momentum in that game was really impressive, I thought, when he came on. So hopefully he can find a bit more of a consistent role this year and show us all why he was taken 5th overall a few years ago. So, with all that being said, let's get into the ladder projection for me. And as I said, I think they're definitely making the finals for sure. I think they also have premiership upside this year. I do also think that they're going to have some growing pains early on with the combination of the new coach, the new roles, and obviously Errol Goulden missing. So for that reason, I have them ranked 5th heading into the year with my power rankings. And after going through the fixtures, I have them ending up about 6th on the ladder. 6th on the ladder. That's right. So exciting year for the Swans. Hopefully they can bounce back and repair some of the damage they caused to the blood culture
narrative last year. So yeah, looking forward to them and seeing how everything unfolds. Alrighty, catch you guys.